With regard to the SAA Takaso deal, I noted what the parliamentary or the portfolio committee said, and of course, things have to be done openly and transparently and all that. There are some times when transactions are done, so that they don't disturb the closure of those transactions. There are certain things that, as said, should be communicated at certain times. And in this regard, I don't think that the absence of whatever information that they needed is something that testifies to an underhand process, a devious process that's underway. I think the minister has been fairly straightforward in articulating the various broad parameters of the transaction. But I would say to the Minister, go and meet the committee and outline to the committee the various issues that they are concerned about. Because there's nothing to hide, the Minister should be able to go and explain. And if certain things are so confidential as to lead to the collapse of the transaction, it should be said so, because that's what often happens. People sign non-disclosure agreements, they sign confidential agreements, but we have to say that this is a public asset. So there's quite a bit of information that needs to be put on the table. And I don't believe and refuse to believe and will not allow it that there should be underhand type of details that make people so suspicious. So information to the extent that it complies with the various agreements that have been reached should be put on the table. So I'll encourage the Minister to go and engage with that committee. Thank you. Let me start with the last one. Having heard you saying we've received this review with humility, and we're very pleased that our people had an opportunity to assess our performance in relation to the manifesto's implementation. Would I vote for the ANC? Of course I would. You must expect that I would. There have been, yes, successes. And sometimes, you know, when we do these assessments, we don't talk about areas where there's been positive outcomes. And I guess for yourselves as the media, you always want to focus on the negatives. There have been successes, areas where the successes have been noticed by our people and have said, we're grateful, we're happy that you've done A, B, C, D. And that does not mean there haven't been weaknesses. That does not mean there haven't been failures. Because in life, it never happens that you get everything A. There will be areas where there are weaknesses, there will be areas where there are failures. But on balance, when you weigh up everything, we are finding that there have been more breakthroughs, more successes. When we launched the manifesto, we actually said, yes, there have been successes in a number of areas, and there's work in progress in many more, which would, in color terms, be categorized as yellow, and the others would be green, and the others would be red, where there's work not having been done. And as we count, and I'm not going to count all this for you, we have found that there has been enormous achievement and progress. Even if you don't look at it from, just a 5-year period, you look at it from a 30-year period. I was reading a column by Stephen Friedman who is one of the leading analysts in the country. And he was saying, those who say that there hasn't been progress in South Africa are simply not telling the truth. And that is the reality. Has there been weaknesses? Yes. And we admit that. We testify to that. Have there been failures? Yes, there have been. But the successes, the progress far outweighs areas where there has been weaknesses. And when you look at some of the challenges that we've had just in the past 5 years, COVID, floods, unrest, load shedding, logistics, and if you look at that, the common thread that runs through it all is that the government has been responding to each one. Unemployment, the unemployment levels, well, the economy first. The economy has gone back to pre-COVID levels. Unemployment has gone back to pre-COVID levels. We lost, officially we say we lost 2 million jobs. But in reality, we did lose more than 2 million jobs during COVID. And many countries around the world are still trying to recover from that COVID damage. What have we been doing? We've been working throughout this period to restore the jobs. We've created 1,200 opportunities. If you go to our schools today, there's not even a single school where you will go to where either teachers, students, parents will not applaud the way in which we've brought young people into schools to assist in schools, administration's delivery of the curriculum, and they're just overjoyed. We've got 25,000 schools, and we've infused well over 800,000 people in those areas. In agriculture, we have, for the first time in a long time, given people capability to farm, seeds, fertilizers, and that has impacted the lives of more than 40,000 people. When you look at, for instance, education, to have risen from 60,000 that we assisted in 1994 today to 800,000. Nzimande actually says, President, it's more than that. It's 1.2 million. And I say, I'll stick to 800,000 because we're paying out 48 billion rand a year to support the education of our young people. Many of our schools no longer pay fees. No fee schools. When I went to school, my parents paid fees. In other countries, as I talk to other presidents, they say, yes, they still have to pay fees. We now have no fee schools. Healthcare is another area. The number of clinics that have been built throughout are huge. Now, of course, we're dealing now with the problem of potholes. They're potholes because, yes, infrastructure, we've seen a decline in investment in infrastructure. The gross capital fixed investment has been sliding down from both the private sector side and the public sector side. And we're trying to reboost that. And one of the things that I think has set us now on a course of better delivery and addressing the needs of our people is now to have come up with, if you listen to the medium-term policy budget statement, you should have read the line where the minister has said, we will now be embarking on funding mechanisms, innovative and new funding mechanisms to fund projects and infrastructure, where we are going to work more closely with the private sector. Our fiscus, our budget, 60% of it is for social welfare, which leaves you with 40% for real investment, even less than that, into the economy. We've had to come up with new, innovative funding mechanisms to be able to fund social infrastructure, to build the roads, to build more hospitals, more clinics, more universities, and more houses. I referred in my general input to just Northern Cape. And when you look at it, you say, if we don't come up with a new funding mechanism, they're going to wait for 50 years until we get rid of our informal settlements. But now we've embarked on a new funding mechanism, which is going to enable Zamani Sol to launch a R1 billion housing project next year in January, because we now have a new funding mechanism. If we didn't have that, we would have waited. Where has this funding mechanism come? It has come out of discussions, change of approach, change of doing things, and making sure that we do indeed begin the process of getting things to change around. Now, would I vote for the ANC with that in mind? Yes, I would. Because I would say your experience as the ANC, where you've made mistakes, where you've hit some issues very, very on the mark, tells me that you have learned a lot of lessons along the way. You are now going to be able to correct a number of things. I also spoke about unspent budgets. Realize that there's something like up to 20 billion rand that goes unspent. We now say we're focusing on that. No entity must say we couldn't spend the money because we didn't have capacity, we didn't have the wherewithal, and there's somebody who was rigging the procurement process. We're correcting that. So we're streamlining all these things, and that's what gives me a great deal of hope that we are going to turn this ship around, and we are turning it around. A good example, a very good example, is just the Hammanskraal issue. 12 years, nothing has moved, largely because it's been a sole responsibility of the local government. And we say, no, we're changing that. National is now going to intervene. We're going to intervene, we're going to change things, and that's exactly what we're doing now. We're redirecting the way the budget has been structured, and we are going to intervene directly ourselves. The creation of 1.2 million job opportunities, national, has been intervening and saying this is how we are going to do it, rather than just leave it, with various structures and not much gets done. So I would vote for the ANC for that, and that gives me a great deal of comfort. News 24, are you happy with... Oh dear, I wrote something, I can't read it myself. Oh yes, Minister's performance. Performance across the board has been improving, notwithstanding the challenges. And I have seen my ministers improving the various areas where they have been deployed. We started off by saying we want those performance agreements, and then I said I want to meet you all so that we focus on your priorities, and we've done that. And I'm meeting them again and say I want to see what progress has been made. And it is interesting that each time we meet, new issues come up. For instance, we looked at the Ministry of Labour, and we said we were able to navigate our way through COVID by deploying 70 billion, was it 70? Yes, 70 billion rand to show up those who either lost their jobs or had job processes where their work stopped or stalled. We were able to support those. But one of the remits of the Department of Labour and Employment is to have labour activation processes. And we've looked at that and said, we need to be creating more and more job opportunities for our people. We have the resource, and we can redirect and make sure that we create more job opportunities. That's precisely what we're doing. And I do that on engagement with the ministers. Some of it may not be seen in an overt way, but this machine is continuing to work to address the needs of our people, to address them. And as we do that, when it comes to water, when it comes to roads, when it comes, for instance, to the logistics issue, which you cited as well. Broken down, being repaired. The roadmap that we've put in place is doing precisely that. So a lot is being done, even by the ministers, to reposition many of the things that we're doing. You then say, the SG was complaining about the veterans that they must stop decampaigning the ANC. The SG raises this issue because it's an important one. It's very important. We've been saying we're a party that should have one message, and we should have as many people as possible to articulate that message. And there must be unity of purpose. I am the first to have said to the National Executive, let us have unity of purpose and let us unify the message that we beam out to our people so that we don't confuse them. Our people should not be confused by what we articulate.